But we wanted to finish our tour jar series and talk a little bit about what we learned through the whole process, what some of the logistical things we had to tackle were, and just kind of how we got the tour going and how we have reshaped how we think about things since then.
My biggest takeaway from doing the tour is that it's a way that you can actually make money. Like, I wasn't really sure beforehand whether or not all that driving and food and, having to pay for campsites or maybe even a hotel or two or any of that would work out logistically or not. But it did. We didn't make a killing or anything on the tour, but we did make enough money that we were able to pay for the tour and go see a bunch of neat places that we had never been to. And I think we could do more of that in the future and maybe even tighten the shows up a little bit to where the income ratio is even better. But it can be done. Obviously lots of bands have done it, but it's just nice to know that we were able to do it.
Yeah, it's easy to think, especially if you've never done something like that before. It's really easy to fall into the mindset of, this band that I know has done it, but they're them and I'm me, and can I really do this? Am I really good enough to do this? And the reality is, when you find your people, you find your niche, it's totally possible. I think that's one of the most important things, is knowing your core demographic, and figuring out what sort of places would be a good fit for you. So if you've been playing around locally, you kind of already have a good idea about what that is. So trust your instincts as you start going into the booking process. One thing that I learned, we had tried to do like a mini baby weekend tour back in 2018. And I was like, if I give everybody 6 months lead time, that should be plenty of time. And I learned that lead time is weird. For a lot of places, you want to go as far as a year out, especially if you want to get into more listening room, theater type spaces. They book way, way farther in advance than something like a brewery or a coffee shop might. So just make sure that even if this is something you're thinking about doing in maybe a year or two, that you start doing that research now and start looking for the places that you want to try to get into and want to try to play for. That being said, not everywhere is like that. And there are some places we were booking right up until probably a month before. And the reality is, you may end up picking up a gig on the way back or in between things. We didn't do that this time, but we've done it before. That kind of thing happens too. So don't panic if there's white space on your calendar. You're either going to have a good day off, or you can fill it in with something else as you go along. I totally reevaluated my definition of long drives. Basically, most of the gigs we play are anywhere between an hour and 3 hours away. We do play in Charleston quite a bit, which is 4.5 to 5 hours, depending on traffic. And I remember the first time we played Charleston, I was like, oh my gosh, this drive is so long. We have to have a place to stay the night because I can't drive back. And then in this, with this tour, you're driving hours and hours and hours. You're driving all day. You're doing more driving than you're ever playing music, period. And you're easily spending 10 hours in a car at a stretch. And so now the idea of driving for a long period of time does not bother me at all. I think 3 hours seems like nothing to me now, which is great. Because that means that moving forward, we're going to be able to play a wider radius than I had been comfortable playing with before. So it pushed me out of my comfort zone in that way.
And I think that's just the nature of being a professional musician. You have to be okay with lots and lots of driving. My biggest fear in this whole tour that I had was the car breaking down. That was by far the most stressful part of the whole tour for me.
Yeah.
Because we had went to great lengths to make sure the car was ready for the trip, but my car is from 2000, so it's a 20-year-old car and has, approaching 200,000 miles on it. So we had got my stepdad, who's a mechanic, to do a bunch of work to it and get it all ready for the trip. That's great. But then, halfway through the trip, suddenly the air conditioning compressor pulley started going bad. Luckily, I cut the compressor off and we were able to make it through the rest of the trip with it making terrible noise. And if it had really seized up, we'd been in really bad shape. But that's the thing. You want to try to do everything you can to prepare, but still, even though we did everything we could do, we still almost had a car breakdown situation, which would have cut us out of probably a couple gigs and also stranded us in the middle of who knows where in Nevada or something.
Yeah.
So
we're on the prowl for a new gigging car at this point, just because that one, didn't work. The other thing that I think I learned was how, like, my tolerance level for a certain level of discomfort. I always thought that I was like, oh, well, I can't sleep in a car. I'm just going to have to, we're going to have to get an Airbnb or a hotel or at least a campsite. And we slept in the car so much, and we, like, drove all night multiple times. And so I think my tolerance level for that was greater than I realized it was. And also, one of the big ways that we were able to save money on our trip, and also potentially save a little bit of our arteries to avoid eating fast food all the time, we did a big, like, grocery shop beforehand and got a bunch of, like, canned goods and some quinoa, like little quinoa meals that are really good. And we would kind of supplement with fruits and vegetables along the way. We'd swing into a grocery store and grab, some apples or some oranges or things like that.
Try to avoid buying in California.
Yeah, those are some expensive apples. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, so little grocery shoppy things. We didn't really ever stay anywhere where we had access to a stove. We only stayed in 2 places where we had access to a stove. And so we actually cooked a lot of meals and ate a lot of, like, home cooked stuff that was very similar to what we eat when we're at home. So we did that on a camping stove. I have a little camping stove that we brought with us. And that was actually a lot of fun. And I think it was good for us, like, from a gastric standpoint too. It's like, because whenever you travel, it's very easy to, like, get stomach upsets just by being in a place that has different food, different water, and things like that. And so being able to, like,
being in a car for that long,
so being able to cook stuff that was, like, healthy and tasted good and didn't totally, like, wreak havoc on our stomachs while we were trying to drive for 10 hours was really good. And I think the other saving grace on tour, especially with the drives, were audiobooks.
Yeah. So we bought one of those little speakers, Bluetooth speakers that you clip onto your sun visor, and we actually got a temporary subscription to Scribd. I call it Scribded. But anyway, that was really fantastic. Like, there's a lot of different services out there, and I love audiobooks, and to me, Audible is way too expensive for what it provides. But Scribd I really enjoyed because they give you basically unlimited access to everything that they have, and they have quite a big selection. So we just popped in an audiobook, and that's the next 30 plus hours of on the road taken care of. So the final thing I'll say is that as soon as we got done with that tour, we were, like, really hyped and jazzed to go do another one. We just immediately wanted to get back out on the road and do more because it was just, despite all the difficulties, it was a really amazing experience, and we want to do it again. Just like, man, just as long as, nothing like a global pandemic gets in the way.